On New Year's Eve, I was 5 minutes late serving dinner. My husband screamed, "Where have you been, you slut?" Then he lifted the silver cloche. What was underneath wasn't food. He screamed on New Year's Eve, "Where have you been, you slut? My family is starving." Frank's face was purple with rage, his finger jabbing toward me like a weapon. Behind him, his mother Edna sat at the dining table with her arms crossed, and his sister Diane smirked from the corner.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
I smiled, holding his shopping bags, and said, "Dinner is served. Go lift the lid." The dining room was decorated beautifully. I'd spent 3 hours that morning arranging the centerpiece, polishing the silver, setting out the good china that had belonged to my grandmother. The table could seat 12, but tonight there were only 6 places set. Frank, Edna, Diane, my son Timothy, his wife Ashley, and me. Except I wouldn't be sitting down. Frank stormed past me, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. He'd always walked like he owned every room he entered. For 37 years, I'd let him believe he did. "Finally," Edna said. "I thought we'd starve to death waiting for you." "Traffic was terrible," I said. "Holiday shoppers. You should have left earlier." Diane's voice dripped with the same contempt she'd shown me since the day I married her brother. "Mother's blood sugar is low." I set the shopping bags on the sideboard. They were full of groceries I'd never cook. Ingredients for a feast that would never happen. The turkey, the stuffing, the pies, all of it would go to waste. But that was the point. Frank reached the head of the table, where I'd placed the large silver cloche I'd bought specifically for this occasion. It was beautiful, polished to a mirror shine, sitting atop a serving platter like it held something precious. "This better be worth the wait," Frank said. "Oh, it is." He grabbed the handle and lifted. The cloche rose, revealing not a turkey, not a ham, not any of the food his family expected. There was only one thing resting on the white china, a manila envelope. Frank stared at it. The room went silent. Even Edna stopped her complaining. "What is this?" Frank asked. "Open it and see." He picked up the envelope with trembling hands. I watched his face as he pulled out the contents. First, 2 plane tickets to Fort Lauderdale, dated January 3rd, his name on one, not mine on the other. Then a contract, pages and pages of legal text, with his signature at the bottom and a real estate agent's letterhead at the top. The contract to sell our house. The house we'd lived in for 35 years. The house where we'd raised our son. The house Frank was planning to sell out from under me while I still lived in it. "How did you get these?" Frank's voice was barely a whisper. "Does it matter?" "These were in my safe, in my office. How did you—" "I've known the combination for 20 years, Frank. I've known a lot of things for a lot of years." Edna leaned forward, trying to see what Frank was holding. "What is it? What's going on?" "Your son was planning to abandon me." I walked around the table, making sure everyone could hear. In 3 days, he was going to fly to Florida with someone named Lorraine. He was going to sell this house, take the money, and start a new life, without me, without telling me, without giving me a single penny of what I'm owed after 37 years. "That's ridiculous," Diane said. "Frank would never—" "Frank already did." I pointed at the contract in his hands. "That's his signature. That's a listing agreement for $425,000. The closing was scheduled for February 15th. By then, he'd be in Fort Lauderdale, and I'd be homeless." Timothy stood up from his chair. He'd been quiet since I arrived, sensing something was wrong. My son had always been perceptive that way, even if he'd spent most of his adult life siding with his father. "Dad, is this true?" Frank didn't answer. He was still staring at the papers, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, anger, fear, and finally, something I'd never seen before, defeat. "Frank, say something," Edna demanded. "Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding." Ashley's voice was soft but clear. She was standing behind Timothy, her hand on his shoulder. "It's true, all of it." Everyone turned to look at my daughter-in-law, sweet Ashley, who'd married into this family 5 years ago and had never quite fit in. who'd endured Edna's criticism and Diane's snide remarks and Frank's casual dismissal, who had come to me 2 weeks ago with a secret that changed everything. "How do you know?" Timothy asked his wife. "Because I heard them planning it. Your father and your Aunt Diane, 3 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. I went to get more wine from the kitchen, and they were in the pantry, talking about tickets and contracts and how to handle the Helen situation." Diane's face went pale. "You little—" "Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare attack her for telling the truth. Not when you've been lying to everyone for months." "I wasn't lying. I was helping my brother. Helping him abandon his wife of 37 years. Helping him steal a house that I paid for with my inheritance. Helping him run away with some woman half his age. Lorraine is not half his age. So you know her name." I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "You know her name because you've met her. Because you helped Frank set this up. Because the two of you have been plotting behind my back while I cooked your dinners and cleaned your messes and pretended everything was fine." The room was silent. Outside, I could hear fireworks starting, early celebrations from neighbors who couldn't wait for midnight. Inside, the only sound was Frank's heavy breathing. "Helen," he finally said, "we need to talk about this. Privately." "We don't. There's nothing to talk about." I made a mistake. I was confused. "Lorraine, she's nobody. She doesn't mean anything." "She meant enough for you to buy plane tickets. She meant enough for you to list our house. She meant enough for you to throw away 37 years without even telling me." "I was going to tell you." "When? After you'd already left? After the house was sold and the money was gone? After I was standing on the street with nothing?" Frank had no answer. Because there was no answer. He'd been caught, completely and totally, and he knew it. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to leave this house tonight. Not in 3 days. Not after the holiday. Tonight. You can't throw me out. This is my house, too." "It's not." I reached into the shopping bag and pulled out another envelope. This one was thicker, filled with documents I'd spent the past 2 weeks gathering. This house was purchased in 1989 with money from my parents' estate. The deed is in my name alone. You've never contributed a single payment to the mortgage because there was no mortgage. I paid cash. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented. I have the original deed. I have the bank records. I have 35 years of property tax receipts with my name on them. I dropped the envelope on the table. "Check for yourself." Frank grabbed the envelope and tore it open. I watched his face as he read the deed, saw his name nowhere on it, understood for the first time that the house he'd treated as his kingdom had never belonged to him at all. "This doesn't make sense. We've been married for 37 years. Half of everything is mine. Half of marital assets, yes. But this house was purchased before our marriage. It's my separate property. My lawyer confirmed it." "You talked to a lawyer?" "I talked to 3 lawyers, Frank. And an accountant. And a private investigator. I've been very busy these past 2 weeks." Edna stood up from her chair, her face twisted with fury. "This is outrageous. Frank, call the police. She's trying to steal your home." "It was never his home, Edna. It was always mine. He just lived in it." Timothy stepped forward. He looked like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. "Mom, I don't understand. You've known about this for 2 weeks? Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I needed proof. I needed to make sure everything was in order before I confronted him. And I needed tonight." "Why tonight?" "Because it's New Year's Eve. Because this family was all together. Because I wanted everyone to see exactly who Frank Morris really is." I turned to face my husband, the man I'd married when I was 22 years old, the man I'd cooked for and cleaned for and supported through every crisis, the man who'd decided I was disposable. "You have 1 hour to pack a bag and leave. After that, I'm calling the police." "Helen, please." 1 hour, Frank. Starting now." He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. And maybe he hadn't. Maybe the woman he married had disappeared years ago, replaced by someone he never bothered to notice. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. You should have thought of that before you tried to throw me out. Frank looked at his mother, at his sister, at his son, looking for support. looking for someone to take his side. But Edna was silent. Diane was staring at the floor. And Timothy was looking at his father with something that might have been disgust. The clock on the wall showed 11:02 p.m. In less than an hour, a new year would begin. And my old life would finally be over. The clock read 11:15 when Frank finally moved. He walked past me without a word, his shoulders slumped, his face gray. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of drawers opening in our bedroom. Our bedroom. That would have to change too. "I can't believe you did this." Edna's voice was ice. She hadn't moved from her chair, her wrinkled hands gripping the armrests like she was holding herself together. "On New Year's Eve, in front of the whole family. Would you have preferred I wait until after he'd left? Until after the house was sold? Until after I had nothing? I would have preferred you handle this like a lady, in private, with dignity." "Dignity?" I laughed. "Edna, I've spent 37 years being dignified. I've cooked your Thanksgiving dinners and hosted your birthday parties and listened to your complaints about everything from the temperature of the soup to the thread count of the guest towels. I've been dignified enough for a lifetime." "Mother, maybe we should go." Diane was already reaching for her coat. She'd been silent since Ashley's revelation, her face a mask of guilty fury. "This isn't the time. You're not going anywhere." I stepped between Diane and the front hall. "You're part of this. You knew what Frank was planning. You helped him. I was just giving him advice. You were conspiring with him to leave me homeless. You had a room ready at your house for him and his girlfriend. You were going to take him in while I stood on the street wondering what happened to my life. That's not—" "Ashley heard you, Diane. She heard everything. The tickets, the timing, the plan to wait until the house sold before telling me. You sat at my table every Sunday for the past 3 months, eating my food, smiling at me, knowing the whole time that your brother was planning to destroy me." Diane's mouth opened and closed. She had nothing to say. There was nothing to say. Timothy cleared his throat. He'd been standing by the window, watching the early fireworks, processing everything he'd learned. My son had his father's build and his father's stubbornness, but he had my mother's eyes, kind eyes that saw more than people expected. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. Could you? Would you have believed me if I'd told you your father was planning to abandon me?" He hesitated. "I don't know. That's why I didn't tell you. I needed proof. I needed you to see it with your own eyes, hear it with your own ears. Otherwise, it would have been my word against his. And in this family, my word has never counted for much. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times have you taken his side, Timothy? How many arguments? How many disagreements? How many times has your father said one thing and I've said another, and you've automatically believed him?" Timothy didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. "I'm not blaming you," I said. "Frank is your father. It's natural to trust your father. But I needed you to see who he really is. I needed everyone to see." Ashley came to stand beside me. She was a small woman, quiet, easy to overlook, but she had a core of steel that I'd recognized the first time we met. That steel was showing now. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said to Timothy. "I didn't know what to do. I heard them talking and I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. But you hadn't. I hadn't." Upstairs, I heard Frank moving around, opening closets, pulling out suitcases, the sounds of a man packing up his life in a hurry. "Let me tell you about the past 37 years, I said, "since we're all being honest tonight." I walked to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of wine. The bottle was expensive, something I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. I married Frank in 1987. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, working as a secretary at his father's company. He was 25, handsome, charming, and the boss's son. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. "You were the perfect couple," Edna said. "We were never perfect." Frank was controlling from the start. He picked my clothes, my friends, my hobbies. He decided where we'd live, how we'd spend our money, what we'd do on weekends. I went along with it because I thought that's what marriage meant. It does mean that. The husband leads, the wife follows. The husband leads? Edna, your son led us into debt 3 times. He led us into bad investments, failed businesses, and one near bankruptcy that I had to clean up by selling my grandmother's jewelry. The only reason we survived is because I had this house, paid for and clear, that he couldn't touch. Frank has always been a good provider. Frank has never provided anything except stress. I'm the one who worked. I'm the one who saved. I'm the one who kept this family afloat while your son played golf and made plans with other women. Lorraine wasn't the first, Ashley said quietly. I found out about 2 others when I was looking into things after I heard him and Diane talking. The room went still. Even Edna stopped her protests. What do you mean, 2 others? Timothy asked. I hired a private investigator. Your mother's idea, but I paid for it. The PI found records, credit card bills, hotel receipts, phone records. There was a woman in 2015, another one in 2019, and now, Lorraine. Timothy turned to face the stairs, as if he could see through the walls to his father packing above. 3 affairs, in 10 years. At least 3. The investigator said there could be more. And you knew? Timothy asked me. I suspected about the first one. I found a receipt in his jacket, a jewelry store. I knew he hadn't bought anything for me. Why didn't you leave then? I took a long sip of wine. Because I was afraid. Because I didn't think I could make it on my own. Because I still believed somehow that if I just tried harder, things would get better. And they didn't. They got worse. Frank stopped pretending to love me. He stopped pretending to respect me. By last year, we were living like strangers. He slept in the guest room. We barely spoke except when other people were around. I became invisible in my own house. I had no idea. Timothy's voice was thick. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know. I was ashamed. 37 years and I couldn't make my marriage work. I thought it was my fault. It wasn't your fault. I know that now. But it took a long time to understand. It took Ashley coming to me with what she'd heard. It took realizing that Frank wasn't just unhappy. He was planning to destroy me. Footsteps on the stairs. Frank appeared in the dining room doorway, a suitcase in each hand. His face was set in stubborn anger, the same expression I'd seen 1,000 times when he didn't get what he wanted. I'm leaving, he announced. But this isn't over. I'm calling my lawyer first thing tomorrow. Call whoever you want. The house is mine. The evidence is documented. You're not taking anything that belongs to me. We'll see about that. He walked to the front door, then paused. Are you coming, Mother? Diane. Edna rose slowly from her chair. She was 84 years old, frail but fierce, and she looked at me with pure hatred. You've destroyed this family. Frank destroyed this family. I'm just finishing what he started. Come on, Mother. Diane took Edna's arm and guided her toward the door. She didn't look at me as she passed. Neither did Edna. Frank opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of snow and the distant pop of fireworks. Goodbye, Helen, he said. I hope you're happy. I will be. The door closed behind them. I heard car engines start, headlights sweeping across the windows, and then they were gone. Timothy and Ashley stood in the suddenly quiet dining room. The table was still set for 6, the silver cloche still sitting empty on its platter. Mom, Timothy said, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'm sorry. For all the times I took his side, for not seeing what was happening. I set down my wine glass and walked to my son. He was taller than me by almost a foot, but when I hugged him, he felt like the little boy he used to be. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. Frank was very good at hiding who he really was. I should have paid more attention. You're paying attention now. That's what matters. The clock on the wall showed 11:47, 13 minutes until midnight, 13 minutes until the new year. What happens now? Ashley asked. Now? I stepped back from Timothy and looked around the dining room. My house, my life. Now we open a bottle of champagne. Now we watch the fireworks. And now we start over. Together? Timothy asked. If you want. He nodded. Ashley smiled. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something like hope. The worst was over. The best was just beginning. The champagne was French, expensive, a bottle I'd been saving for 15 years. I'd bought it for our 25th anniversary, thinking we'd celebrate together. Frank had forgotten the anniversary entirely. The bottle had sat in the back of the wine cabinet ever since. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings, Timothy and Ashley echoed. We drank standing at the window, watching the fireworks explode over downtown Detroit. The city was celebrating, thousands of people counting down to midnight, cheering as the old year died and the new one was born. In my dining room, the celebration was quieter, but it was no less real. Mom, can I ask you something? Timothy said. Of course. When did you know? That Dad was planning all this? I thought back to that Sunday 2 weeks ago. Ashley at my door, pale and trembling, asking if we could talk in private. The story spilling out of her, fragments of conversation she'd overheard, details that made my blood run cold. December 15th. Ashley came to me after Sunday dinner. She'd heard Frank and Diane talking in the pantry. They didn't know she was there. What exactly did they say? They were discussing logistics. The flight was already booked. The house listing was ready to go live. Frank wanted to wait until after New Year's, let me cook one last holiday dinner, then tell me on January 2nd that he was leaving. The day before his flight. The day before his flight. He was going to give me 24 hours notice that my marriage was over and my house was being sold. Ashley shuddered. When I heard them, I couldn't believe it. Morris was always so charming at family dinners, so pleasant. Frank is very good at being pleasant, as long as you're useful to him. Timothy walked to the window and stared out at the fireworks. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, the way he talked to you, the way he treated you. I thought it was just how marriages were, after so many years. That's not how marriages should be. I know that now. I joined my son at the window. The sky was alive with color, burst after burst of light against the darkness. Let me tell you about the last year, I said, since we're being honest tonight. I'm not sure I want to hear more. You need to hear it. You need to understand why I did what I did tonight. Timothy nodded slowly. Okay. Last Christmas, your father humiliated me in front of the entire family. We were at Diane's house, remember? Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, 40 people. I remember. Dad made that toast about how lucky he was. He made that toast after spending the entire day ignoring me, after criticizing the dessert I'd brought, after telling me in front of everyone that I should have worn something nicer because I looked frumpy. I remember that too. I thought he was just in a bad mood. He was in a perfectly good mood. For everyone except me. And when we got home that night, he told me something I've never forgotten. What? He said, "This is my family. You're just here because I let you be. Don't ever forget that." Timothy turned to face me. He said that? Word for word. That's when I knew our marriage was truly over. Not legally, not publicly, but in every way that mattered. I started sleeping in the guest room after that. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Why didn't you leave then? Because I didn't have a plan. Because I was still afraid. Because 37 years of being told you're not good enough makes you believe it. Ashley came to stand with us. When I told her what I'd heard, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there for a long time, very quiet. And then she said, "Well, now I have a plan." 2 weeks, Timothy said. You put all of this together in 2 weeks? I'd been preparing for years without knowing it. I'd kept all the house documents in a safety deposit box that Frank didn't know about. I had my own bank account, separate from our joint accounts. I'd been quietly building an escape route. But you never used it? I never had a reason, until now. The fireworks were building to a finale, the sky bright with overlapping explosions. Through the window, I could see neighbors on their porches, couples embracing, families cheering. The private investigator was Ashley's idea, I said. She knew someone who knew someone. It took less than a week to find evidence of the other affairs. 3 women. In 10 years. At least 3. The investigator said there were probably more, but the evidence was harder to find. Frank was careful. He used cash when he could, burner phones when he had to. He sounds like a criminal. He was cheating on his wife. That requires planning. Deception. The same skills criminals use. Timothy shook his head. I feel like I didn't know him at all. You knew the version of him he wanted you to see. The successful businessman. The good father. The pillar of the community. That's the version everyone saw. Except you. Except me. I saw the real Frank Morris. The man who couldn't stand to be questioned. Who needed to control everything around him. Who treated his wife like a servant and his mistresses like prizes. And his mother and sister knew. They helped him. Edna has always protected Frank. When he was young, she covered for his mistakes. When he was older, she made excuses for his failures. In her eyes, Frank can do no wrong. And Aunt Diane? Diane has always resented me. She wanted Frank to marry someone else, someone from their social circle. When he chose me instead, she never forgave it. She's spent 37 years waiting for our marriage to fail. So when Dad told her he was leaving, she jumped at the chance to help. She found Lorraine's apartment listing. She helped Frank set up a new bank account. She was going to let them stay with her until the house sold. The finale of fireworks lit up the sky, a cascade of gold and silver and red. I heard cheering from the streets, horns honking, people celebrating the new year. Happy New Year, Ashley said softly. Happy New Year. We stood in silence as the clock struck midnight. The old year was gone. The old Helen was gone too. What happens now? Timothy asked. Legally, I mean. I file for divorce tomorrow. My lawyer has the papers ready. Frank will contest it, of course, but he won't win. The house is mine. The evidence of his affairs will ensure I get a favorable settlement. And if he fights dirty? Then I fight dirtier. I have 3 years of credit card statements showing money spent on other women. I have hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, plane tickets. If Frank wants to drag this into court, I'll make sure everyone sees exactly who he is. You've changed, Mom. I've just stopped pretending. We finished the champagne as the celebration outside wound down. The fireworks ended, the cheering faded, and slowly the neighborhood returned to quiet. You two should go home, I said. It's late. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? Ashley asked. I've been alone for years. I just didn't realize it. Timothy hugged me again. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. Thank you, sweetheart. After they left, I walked through the empty house, the dining room with its untouched table settings, the kitchen with its unused groceries, the living room where Frank had spent so many evenings ignoring me while he texted other women. All of it mine now. Completely, legally, finally mine. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. Frank's side of the closet was half empty, hangers scattered on the floor where he'd grabbed clothes in a hurry. His cologne still lingered in the air, that expensive scent I'd bought him for Christmas year after year. I opened the window and let in the cold January air. Tomorrow, I would change the locks. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of legally ending my marriage. But tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, in my own house, knowing that I had finally taken back control of my life. The clock read 1:15 a.m., January 1st, the first day of my new life. I closed my eyes and slept better than I had in years. Frank's lawyer called on January 2nd, a woman named Barbara Chen, sharp-voiced and aggressive. She informed me that her client was contesting the divorce, claiming the house as marital property, and demanding a full accounting of all assets. Tell your client he can contest whatever he wants, I said. He won't win. Mrs. Morris, I think you're underestimating the complexity of divorce law. And I think you're underestimating how thoroughly I've prepared. I have documentation going back 35 years proving that house was purchased with my inheritance, before my marriage. I have records showing your client contributed nothing to its purchase or maintenance. And I have evidence of at least 3 extramarital affairs that will make any judge very sympathetic to my position. Silence on the other end. Furthermore, I continued, I have a contract your client signed agreeing to sell the house without my knowledge or consent. A contract that would constitute fraud, since he has no ownership interest in the property. If Mr. Morris wants to take this to court, I'm happy to introduce that document as evidence. I'll discuss this with my client. Please do. She hung up. I poured myself another cup of coffee and smiled. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal activity. My lawyer, a bulldog named Patricia Walsh, filed the divorce petition along with a restraining order preventing Frank from approaching the house. Frank's lawyer responded with motions and counter-motions, demands and accusations, all of which Patricia dismantled with surgical precision. He's flailing, Patricia told me during one of our many meetings. He has no case. The house documentation is airtight. The affairs are well documented. His own real estate contract proves he was planning to defraud you. So why is he fighting so hard? Pride, spite, the hope that you'll get tired and settle for less than you deserve. That's not going to happen. I didn't think so. In mid-January, Ashley called with news. Lorraine left him. Already? Apparently she thought Frank was wealthy. When she found out the house wasn't his and his accounts were frozen pending divorce, she disappeared. Where is Frank living now? Diane's house. He's been there since New Year's Eve. The neighbors are starting to talk. Let them talk. Edna is telling everyone you're a gold digger who stole Frank's house. Edna can say whatever she wants. The truth is in the documents. By February, the tide had turned completely. Patricia had obtained Frank's financial records through discovery, and what they revealed was damning. He'd been systematically hiding money for years, funneling cash into accounts under fake names, spending tens of thousands on women who weren't his wife. The total is approximately $127,000, Patricia said. Money that should have been marital assets, spent on affairs. Can I recover it? Most of it, yes. The judge will consider it dissipation of marital assets. Frank will be required to compensate you from his share of other marital property. What other marital property? The house is mine. His retirement account, his stock portfolio, his share of the business he sold 3 years ago, all of it subject to division, and all of it now weighted in your favor because of his conduct. I thought about Frank, sitting in Diane's guest room, watching his empire crumble. He'd spent 37 years believing he controlled everything. Now he controlled nothing. What about criminal charges? For the contract? The DA declined to prosecute. They said it was a civil matter, not a crime. But the contract itself is powerful evidence in the divorce. Good enough. The mediation was scheduled for March 1st. Patricia advised me to prepare for Frank to be difficult, to make demands, to try to bully me into accepting less. He's used to getting what he wants, she said, especially from you. That was the old Helen. The old Helen is gone. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully. A gray suit, professional but not flashy, simple jewelry, hair pulled back. I wanted to look like what I was, a woman who knew her worth and wouldn't be intimidated. The mediation room was beige and anonymous, furnished with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Frank was already there when I arrived, sitting at one end with Barbara Chen beside him. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his face was gaunt, and his eyes had a haunted quality I'd never seen before. Helen, he stood when I entered. Can we talk? Before we start? Anything you want to say, you can say in front of the mediator. Please, just 5 minutes. I looked at Patricia, who shrugged. Your call. We stepped into the hallway. Frank faced me, his hands hanging at his sides, all the arrogance drained out of him. I made a mistake, he said. A terrible mistake. Lorraine, the house, all of it. I was confused. I was going through something. You were going through 3 affairs in 10 years. I know. But I'm asking for another chance. We could go to counseling. We could work on things. Frank, you were planning to abandon me. You were going to sell my house and leave me with nothing. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking perfectly clearly. You had plane tickets. You had a contract. You had a room waiting at your sister's house. That's not confusion. That's planning. Helen, I spent 37 years being your wife, 37 years cooking your meals, cleaning your house, raising your son. I never asked for recognition. I never demanded appreciation. All I wanted was respect. And you couldn't even give me that. I can change. Maybe you can, but you're not going to change for me. That ship has sailed. We returned to the mediation room. The session lasted 4 hours, most of it spent arguing over assets Frank had no legal claim to. His lawyer made increasingly desperate arguments, trying to establish his interest in the house, in my savings, in anything she could. Patricia shot down every attempt. The house was purchased before the marriage with inherited funds, not marital property. Mrs. Morris's savings account was funded by her own employment income, kept separate throughout the marriage. Not marital property. The jewelry Mrs. Morris possesses was inherited from her grandmother. Not marital property. By the end, Frank had been reduced to haggling over furniture, the dining room table, the living room sofa, things he'd never cared about when he lived with them. Take whatever you want, I said finally. I don't need any of it. He looked at me with something like desperation. Helen, please, don't do this. It's already done. The agreement was signed 2 weeks later. Frank got a small cash settlement, the furniture he'd requested, and his retirement accounts minus what he owed me for dissipation. I got the house, my savings, and my freedom. You did it, Patricia said as we walked out of the signing. You're officially divorced. I did it. How do you feel? I thought about the question. For 37 years, I'd defined myself as Frank Morris's wife. Now, I was Helen Morris, standalone, no attachments, no obligations, no one else's expectations. Free, I said. I feel free. That evening, Timothy and Ashley came over to celebrate. We ordered pizza and ate it in the living room, sitting on the floor because Frank had taken the sofas. We should go furniture shopping, Ashley said. Make this place feel like yours. It already feels like mine. For the first time ever. What are you going to do now? Timothy asked. With the rest of your life? I thought about all the things I'd never done, the trips I'd wanted to take, the hobbies I'd set aside, the dreams I'd abandoned to be a good wife. Everything, I said. I'm going to do everything. We stayed up late, talking and laughing and planning. The empty spaces where furniture used to be didn't feel sad. They felt like possibility. At midnight, I walked Timothy and Ashley to the door. Thank you, I said, for believing me, for helping me. That's what family is for, Ashley said. I watched them drive away, then stood on my porch looking up at the stars. The night was cold but clear, and the sky was full of light. I was 59 years old. I was divorced, and I had never been happier. Spring came early that year. By late March, the snow had melted, and the first crocuses were pushing through the soil in my garden. I'd never paid much attention to the garden before. Frank had always complained about the yard work, so I'd kept things simple. Now I stood in the backyard, planting beds and pathways and all the flowers I'd never been allowed to plant. You're really going to do all this yourself? Timothy asked. He and Ashley had stopped by for Sunday brunch, a new tradition we'd started after the divorce. I'm going to try. I've always wanted a real garden, something with color, with life. Dad never would have allowed it. Your father never allowed a lot of things. We walked back inside, where Ashley was setting out the food I'd prepared. Simple things, eggs and toast and fresh fruit, but made with care. Made because I wanted to, not because someone demanded it. Have you heard from him? Ashley asked. Frank. Not since the divorce was finalized. He's still at Diane's. She's complaining to everyone about how hard it is to have him there. She wanted to be his savior. Now she can deal with the reality. Edna won't speak to anyone in the family except Diane. She's telling people you poisoned Timothy against her. Edna can think whatever she wants. Timothy makes his own decisions. My son looked up from his eggs. She called me last week. Grandma. She wanted me to come visit, without Ashley. What did you say? I said no. I said if she couldn't accept my wife, she couldn't have me. Ashley reached over and squeezed his hand. I saw something pass between them, a wordless communication that spoke of love and loyalty. I'm proud of you, I said. Both of you. After brunch, we moved to the living room. I'd bought new furniture, finally, simple pieces that I'd chosen myself. The walls were still mostly bare, but I'd hung a few things. Photos of Timothy as a child. A watercolor I'd painted years ago and hidden in a closet because Frank said it was amateur. You painted that? Timothy stood in front of the watercolor, studying it. I never knew you painted. I gave it up when you were small. Your father said it was a waste of time. It's beautiful. It's imperfect, but it's mine. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Edna standing on my porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. The months since New Year's Eve had aged her. Her hair was thinner, her posture more stooped, her face lined with something that might have been regret. May I come in? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but a bigger part was curious. Edna Morris had never come to see me alone, not once in 37 years. 5 minutes. She walked into my living room and looked around. Her eyes moved over the new furniture, the watercolor on the wall, the photos of Timothy. You've redecorated. Frank took the old furniture. I know. She sat down heavily on my new couch. I helped him move it into Diane's garage. Is that what you came to tell me? No. Edna clasped her hands in her lap. Her rings, the expensive ones she'd collected over decades, clinked together. I came to apologize. I sat down across from her. Timothy and Ashley had appeared in the doorway, watching silently. Apologize for what specifically? For helping Frank plan to abandon me? For spending 37 years treating me like a servant? For telling everyone I poisoned your grandson against you? Edna flinched at each accusation. For all of it. For everything. Why now? Because I'm 84 years old. Because I may not have much time left. Because I've spent the last 3 months watching my son fall apart. And I've realized something. What? He did it to himself. Everything that's happened to him, he brought it on himself. And I helped him. I made excuses for him his whole life. I protected him from the consequences of his actions. I let him believe he could do whatever he wanted without repercussions. You enabled him. Yes, I enabled him. And in doing so, I hurt you. I hurt Timothy. I hurt everyone who loved Frank. Because I couldn't see who he really was. I studied my former mother-in-law. For 37 years, she'd been my tormentor. Every holiday, every family gathering, every Sunday dinner had been an opportunity for her to criticize, to complain, to make me feel small. Why should I believe you've changed? You shouldn't. Words are easy. I've said a lot of words over the years that I didn't mean. Edna reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. But I can offer you this. She held out the envelope. I took it, opened it. Inside was a check, $50,000 made out to me. What is this? It's money I set aside for Frank's inheritance. I was going to leave it to him when I died, but I've changed my will. That money is yours now. I don't want your money, Edna. It's not about what you want. It's about what's right. You spent 37 years taking care of my son. You raised my grandson. You endured more than anyone should have to endure. This money won't make up for any of that, but it's something. I looked at the check. $50,000. It was more than Edna had ever given me in all the years I'd known her. Why now? I asked again. Why? After all these years? Because Diane showed me the contract, the one Frank signed to sell your house. She thought it would make me angry at you, prove that you'd stolen something that belonged to him. Instead, it made me see who my son really is. And who is he? A man who would leave his wife homeless for another woman. A man who would lie and cheat and steal from the person who loved him. A man I don't recognize anymore. Edna's voice cracked. Tears were forming in her eyes. The first tears I'd ever seen her shed. I spent my whole life building Frank up, telling him he was special, that he could have anything he wanted, that the world owed him success. I created a monster, Helen, and you're the one who paid the price. Timothy stepped into the room. Grandma. Timothy. Edna looked at her grandson with naked longing. I'm sorry. For what I said about Ashley. For what I said about your mother. For all of it. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. But I'm asking for a chance. One chance to prove I can be better. The room was silent. I looked at Timothy, at Ashley, at the old woman who had made my life miserable for nearly 4 decades. "Keep your money, Edna." I held out the check. "I don't need it. Please. I want to do something." "If you want to do something, change. Stop making excuses for Frank. Stop blaming me for what happened. Accept that your son destroyed his own marriage, and that I was right to end it. I do accept that. Then prove it. With actions, not checks." Edna took the check back with trembling hands. She stood slowly, using the arm of the couch for support. "I'll try," she said. "I'll try to be better. That's all anyone can do." I walked her to the door. On the porch, she paused. "Helen, for what it's worth, I was wrong about you. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." "I know." She walked to her car, a luxury sedan she'd driven for years. I watched her pull out of the driveway, watched her disappear down the street. "Do you believe her?" Timothy asked. "I don't know. Maybe. People can change, even at 84. "She hurt you for a long time." "She did. But holding on to anger is exhausting. If she wants to change, I'm willing to let her try." Ashley smiled. "That's very generous. It's practical. Life is too short for grudges." We went back to our brunch, our conversation, our new Sunday tradition. The check Edna had tried to give me was forgotten, but her words stayed with me. I created a monster. Maybe she had. Maybe Frank Morris had been broken long before I met him, shaped by a mother who couldn't see his flaws, and a family who protected him from consequences. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it, and understanding was the first step toward moving on. Summer arrived with a heat wave that broke records across the state. I installed air conditioning in the house, another thing Frank had always refused. "Too expensive," he'd said, while spending hundreds on golf clubs and fishing gear. The garden I'd planted was thriving. Roses and dahlias and black-eyed Susans lined the pathways I'd built with my own hands. Neighbors stopped to compliment me on it. Strangers walking by would pause to take photos. "You should enter the garden contest," Margaret Chen said one afternoon. She lived 3 houses down, a widow like me, though her husband had passed from cancer rather than betrayal. "I'm not a widow," I reminded her. "Same difference. Man's gone, isn't he?" She had a point. Timothy helped me build a small greenhouse in the backyard. We worked together on weekends, measuring and cutting and assembling. Ashley would bring lunch, and we'd eat in the garden surrounded by flowers. "Have you thought about dating?" Ashley asked one Sunday. I almost dropped my sandwich. "Dating? I'm 59 years old. Plenty of people date at 59. My grandmother met her second husband at 72. I was married for 37 years. I wouldn't even know how to date. You'd learn. Besides, you look great. All this gardening has been good for you." I looked down at my hands, calloused now from digging and planting and building. My arms were stronger than they'd been in years. My face had more color from the sun. "Maybe someday," I said. "But not yet. I'm still learning who I am without Frank." That was the truth. For 37 years, my identity had been tied to his. Frank's wife, Timothy's mother, the Morris family hostess. Now I was just Helen, and I was still figuring out what that meant. The divorce settlement had given me the house, half of Frank's retirement, and a modest monthly alimony. Not enough to live extravagantly, but enough to live well. I'd gotten a part-time job at a local nursery, helping customers choose plants and planning garden designs. It wasn't much, but I loved it. "Mrs. Morris," a customer approached me one afternoon. "I was hoping you could help me with my backyard." She was young, maybe 30, with a baby on her hip and tired circles under her eyes. "I just moved into the neighborhood," she explained. "My husband travels a lot, and I want something beautiful to look at while he's gone. Something that doesn't need too much maintenance." I spent an hour with her, planning a garden that would give her color and life without demanding more than she could give. When she left, she hugged me. "Thank you. I feel like I just made my first friend here." "You did," I said. "Come back any time." That evening, I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over my garden. A year ago, I'd been serving Frank his New Year's Eve dinner, waiting for whatever complaint he'd level at me. Now I was watching fireflies dance among my flowers, drinking a glass of wine I'd chosen myself, planning tomorrow's projects. The phone rang. Timothy. "Mom, I have news. Ashley's pregnant." I started crying. Happy tears, the kind I hadn't shed in years. "Oh, Timothy! Oh, that's wonderful! We're due in February. You're going to be a grandmother." A grandmother. Another identity to add to my growing list. Helen the gardener, Helen the neighbor, Helen the friend, and now, Helen the grandmother. "I can't wait," I said. "I can't wait to meet this baby." After we hung up, I walked through my garden in the fading light. Each plant I'd chosen, each pathway I'd laid, each bed I'd dug with my own hands. Frank had tried to leave me with nothing. Instead, he'd set me free. The next day, I received an unexpected visitor. Edna appeared at my door again, looking better than she had in spring. She'd lost weight, and there was something different in her eyes. Something softer. "I sold my house," she said. "I'm moving into an assisted living facility. Before I go, I wanted to give you this." She handed me a box. Inside was a collection of photographs, old ones, dating back decades. "These are your wedding photos, the originals. I've kept them all these years because I thought Frank might want them someday, but I think they belong to you." I looked at the photos. Frank and me, young and hopeful, standing at the altar. Frank and me, cutting the cake. Frank and me, dancing our first dance as husband and wife. "Why are you giving me these?" "Because that girl deserves to be remembered. The girl who believed in love, who thought she was building a life with someone. She deserves to exist, even if that life didn't turn out the way she planned." I looked at my younger self in the photos. So hopeful, so naive, so ready to give everything to a man who would never appreciate it. "Thank you, Edna. I've been talking to Frank. At Diane's house. He's not doing well. He blames everyone but himself for what happened. You, me, Timothy, Ashley, everyone except the person who actually destroyed his marriage. Himself. Himself." Edna nodded. "I told him that finally. I told him he made his choices and now he has to live with them. He didn't take it well. I imagine not. He said I was betraying him, that I was choosing you over my own son." "What did you say?" "I said I wasn't choosing anyone. I was just finally seeing the truth." Edna reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, her grip weak. "I wasted so many years, Helen. I can't get them back. But I can spend whatever time I have left being honest. That's all any of us can do." Edna left, and I put the box of photographs in my closet. I wasn't ready to look at them yet. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd show them to my grandchild, tell them the story of a woman who believed in love and was disappointed, but who found something better in the end. Herself. Fall came, and with it the changing of the leaves. My garden faded, but I didn't mourn it. I knew it would return in spring, stronger and more beautiful than before. Timothy and Ashley had their baby shower in October. I hosted it in my garden, surrounded by the last of the summer flowers. Family and friends gathered, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. "To the new parents," Margaret Chen said, raising her glass. "And to the grandmother who's going to spoil this baby rotten." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, feeling light in a way I hadn't felt in decades. After the party, I cleaned up alone. I didn't mind. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man I didn't recognize, about my age, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm your new neighbor. I moved into the Henderson place last week." "Oh, welcome to the neighborhood. I noticed your garden. It's incredible. I was wondering if you might give me some advice. My yard is a disaster." I smiled. "I'd be happy to help." His name was Robert. He was a retired teacher, widowed 3 years ago, with 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. He liked books and classical music and taking long walks in the evening. I showed him my garden, explaining what I'd planted and why. He listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions. When we finished, he invited me to dinner. Just dinner, he said quickly, between neighbors. Nothing more. I'd like that, I said. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. We talked about our children, our grandchildren, our gardens. We talked about our lost spouses, though I didn't mention that mine was lost by choice rather than death. That story could wait. At the end of the night, he walked me to my door. I had a wonderful time, he said. Would you like to do this again? Yes, I said. I would. He smiled, and I smiled back, and for the first time in 37 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Winter came again. A year had passed since that New Year's Eve, since the silver cloche and the plane tickets and the contract that was supposed to steal my home. A year since Frank had called me a slut for being 5 minutes late to serve his dinner. A year since my world had shattered and then rebuilt itself into something better. On New Year's Eve, I hosted a party. Timothy and Ashley came, her belly round with my grandchild. Margaret Chen came, and Robert and the young mother from the nursery, and a dozen other friends I'd made over the past year. We ate food I'd prepared myself, dishes I'd chosen because I loved them, not because anyone demanded them. We drank champagne and told stories and laughed at jokes that would have made Frank roll his eyes. At midnight, we counted down together. When the clock struck 12, Robert kissed me gently on the cheek. Happy New Year, Helen. Happy New Year, Robert. Outside, fireworks exploded over the neighborhood. Inside, surrounded by people who loved me, I raised my glass. To new beginnings, I said. To new beginnings, everyone echoed. I thought about Frank, alone at Diane's house, watching the same fireworks through a window. I thought about Edna, in her assisted living facility, maybe sleeping through the celebration. I thought about all the years I'd spent serving a man who never appreciated me, all the holidays ruined by his complaints, all the dreams I'd abandoned to keep peace. Then I stopped thinking about any of it. The past was over, the future was unwritten, and the present, this moment, surrounded by friends and family and new love, was exactly what I'd always wanted. I'd spent 37 years being Frank Morris's wife. Now I was finally, completely just Helen, and Helen was enough.